Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's story, an entitled Karen wants my kid kicked out of the ER, claiming that her life is more important than my kid. Here is what happened. The title story starts like this. So, my last week started off horribly when I got a phone call I hope no parent ever gets. It was from my son's kindergarten teacher and I was immediately on edge. My son is not the kind who gets into trouble for misbehaving, so the probability of this call being about something terrible was high. And sadly I was right. The school nurse was on the line and she explained that my son had been complaining of severe stomach pain all morning. She had done what she could to make him comfortable, but she recommended that I take him to the emergency room for further evaluation. It was noon, so I decided to take half a day off and rushed out. When I arrived, I found him lying on a cot in the nurse's office. My son is really stubborn and usually hides away his pain or dislikes, so seeing him cry silently was downright the most heartbreaking sight I'd ever seen. I helped him into the car and we rushed to the hospital. When we arrived, the nurse immediately took my son into his care. They ran tests, took his temperature and blood pressure, and examined him from head to toe. As we waited for the results, my son and I played games and read books. But the pain was too severe and it was difficult for him to concentrate on the phone, so after a while I just opened YouTube Kids and played some of the videos I knew he liked. In the middle of all of this, I heard a woman entering the ER. She was clutching her chest and gasping for breath, and it was clear that she was also in distress. A nurse quickly rushed to her side, assessing her condition and trying to calm her down. But just as quickly as my attention had been drawn to her, my focus was pulled back to my son as a nurse called in for his diagnosis. It turned out that my son had developed a severe case of appendicitis. I was both surprised and terrified. I had never even heard of a child so young getting appendicitis. Anyway, the doctors assured me that it was not uncommon and that they would do everything they could to treat my son and make him comfortable. The surgery itself would not take long, I just needed to sign some documents before they could go through it. The nurse excused herself and gave us some private time while she prepared the documents, and I had to go through the gruesome task of explaining to my son what was about to happen. But before that, I rang up my wife. She had been out of town for 3 days because of her job and I really needed her emotional support for this. I quickly explained everything to her and put the phone on speaker so we can both talk to our son. He seemed to have an idea of what was about to happen, but he still looked scared. And if I'm being honest, I felt even more scared than him. But I tried to appear confident and smiled as much as I could. The three of us talked some more before I disconnected the call and helped my son out. As we emerged from the consultation room, we were met with a loud and angry scene. The same woman who had been in distress earlier, let's call her Karen, was now screaming at the nurse who had tried to help her. She was insisting that she was having a heart attack despite the nurse's assessment that her symptoms were not indicative of one. Karen's screaming was getting louder and more intense and I could feel my own anxiety levels rising. My son, who was already in pain and scared, was getting even more anxious as well. "Daddy, what's happening?" he whispered to me. "It's okay, sweetie," I reassured him, trying to stay calm despite the chaos around us. "That woman is just upset, but the doctors and nurses are taking care of her. Let's see if we can find a quieter place to wait for our paperwork to be sorted out." I approached the nurse who had just treated my son and explained the situation. She nodded sympathetically and led us to a private room where we could wait in peace. As soon as we entered the private room, I could feel my body relax. Finally, some peace and quiet. My son was feeling dizzy, so I sat down on the floor in front of him and helped him drink some water. I had just closed my eyes for a moment when I heard the door slam open. I turned around to see Karen standing there, pointing at my son and screaming about how the staff was being biased towards her. I let out a sigh as I realized that we were not gonna get any peace after all. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her or try to ignore her and focus on my son? I decided against confrontation because that meant leaving my son's side. I let the nurse deal with Karen. After what felt like an eternity of Karen screaming, she was finally escorted out of the room. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned to the nurse who looked exhausted and apologetic. "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that," she said to me. "Karen is a difficult patient. She comes in every month claiming all sorts of things, but we can never find anything wrong with her." I nodded understandingly. "It's okay really, I just want my son to be okay." The nurse nodded and left us alone to sign the important documents. It was a relief to finally have that done, but my anxiety was still high. My son was about to undergo surgery and I was alone with my thoughts and worries. As my mind raced, I took out my phone and dialed my wife's number again. I knew I was disturbing her during her work, but I just needed someone at the moment. Of course, she understood, and as we chatted for a bit, I could feel my heart calm down. It seemed like luck was not on my side today, unfortunately. Only half an hour had passed when the door to our private room was slammed open once again and Karen barged in. But this time, instead of screaming, she came running towards me before falling down on the floor in front of me. I jumped back, not sure what to do or how to help. The nurses and security guards came rushing in, and I watched in horror as Karen began to scream and thrash around on the floor. "I'm paralyzed," she screamed. "That stupid incompetent nurse made me paralyzed." It was like a scene out of a very bad comedy movie, though unfortunately I could not find any comedy in it, only cringe. I watched as the medical professionals worked to stabilize Karen, but it seemed like the woman was intent on causing a scene. I don't remember everything she said, but this is basically the gist of it. "I pay my taxes, I'm a pure-blooded citizen, my life is more important. Kick that monkey and his father out now." It took me a moment to realize what she meant when she said monkey. She was referring to my son. For people who don't know, monkey is usually used to refer to a black person in a derogatory or degrading manner, mocking their skin color and facial features. But in this case, while the word is very offensive, it was wholly incorrect, because while we are from Africa, we are specifically from Egypt, which doesn't automatically translate to being black. But of course, racists like Karen would not understand this small detail. Anyway, I watched as security guards tried to drag Karen away, who continued to be more chaotic than a 5-year-old in front of the ice cream parlor. She twisted and turned in their holds, screaming profanities at all of them, until finally the door opened again and police officers rushed inside. I was told to move out, but I was still able to catch them taking care of Karen. I watched along with the other people in the ER as Karen was taken out like a sack of potatoes, and despite how tense the atmosphere was, I could not help but chuckle. A group of teenage boys standing near me chuckled along with me, calling her a Karen, and that was how I got to know what to call women like these. Entitled women who desperately wanted her equal attention cake. I didn't quite understand what that meant. Edit number 1, thank you for your sweet comments. For people concerned, yes, my son is doing very well now. The surgery was a success and he is finally living pain-free with me and his mom. We even decided to take a few days off work to be with him while he recovers. Edit number 2, also thank you to whoever pointed out the equal attention cake meme. I'm not sure I'll be watching Family Guy with my son, but I think my wife will enjoy the show. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment if you want to support me. Thank you so much. The next one is a revenge story. It starts like this. About a year ago, we let a friend of ours and her 2 grown kids move in with us. The oldest turned 20 and doesn't work, the youngest just turned 18 and also does not work. Both sit around all day playing video games, but the 18-year-old is still in school. Lately, food has been going missing around the house. Unopened tubs of cookie dough are found opened, all but enough for 2 cookies left, and finger lines from where it is clear someone used their fingers to scoop the dough out. These tubs make 5 dozen cookies. The 18-year-old is fat, he has been caught numerous times eating food that isn't his, hiding it, lying about it, and then confessing when evidence is presented. He tries to blame his big brother, who is skinny as a rail and never lies. So, my revenge. He has been doing odd jobs to make cash and he gets his own little snacks from the grocery store. I've been stealing them and enjoying them, only his ones. And of course only small amounts, enough to drive him crazy. He's starting getting pissed and accusing his brother, now he is questioning his own food intake, and his mother told him to shut the hell up, that he has lied so much no one trusts him anymore, so he probably ate it and is looking for sympathy. Anything he buys, snacks, energy drinks, anything that's paid for with his own money, I grab a small amount of it. He buys 3 energy drinks, 1 goes missing. He buys a box of cookies, I open it before him and take 3 out. He is getting pissed and the only response he is getting is that it must suck to have someone steal from you. I am currently enjoying a nice energy drink as I clean the garage. The garage he made a mess in and refused to clean up. Yes, it's petty, but here we are. And the next one is another revenge story. And please let me know in the comments whether you enjoy these small petty revenge stories. I find them very entertaining. Earlier this week I was checking out the grocery store. I had a full buggy and was loading it onto the conveyor. The cashier finished with the person in front of me and turned the conveyor back on so that my items moved forward. I still had plenty of items in my buggy to put up there, but the a-hole woman behind me immediately put the plastic divider on the conveyor and started putting her crap behind mine. I was already feeling annoyed that she was so close behind me in line, and this set me off. I looked at the conveyor and then down to my buggy of stuff and up to her face and gave her the stink eye. Then I proceeded to put my arm down across the conveyor so that her items couldn't move forward and told my daughter to put our things on the conveyor for me. A whole lady says excuse me with attitude and I replied no excuse me, I was clearly not done unloading my buggy. Then I proceeded to finish checking out as slowly as possible while a whole lady stared holes in the back of my head. Edit, for those that don't think this is petty revenge, I took at least 2 minutes to find my store card and coupons and another 2 minutes to find my bank card to pay for my items. All the while apologizing to the cashier and smirking at the a-hole waiting behind me. And the next one is a very satisfying Entitled People airplane story. A few years ago, my college sports team was flying out for a competition. We were flying out of our own town, which has notoriously quick and easy airport experiences for those of us who know it well. When flying alone, it's generally no sweat to show up only an hour before, or even less, but this is always a risk in all airports, even the small ones. Our team of 20 people showed up for our early flight 2 hours beforehand, which in my opinion is still cutting it close in a lot of cases. When we get there, we can see immediately a long line out of security, which is not normal at all for this airport. We all have to check our bags and get into line, where every once in a while an employee would walk through the line asking people to look at their tickets for TSA pre-check, which means you basically get to go straight through the security line. While we were waiting an unusually long time, we started to pick up on a lot of different people in front and behind us that are all about to miss the same flight. Some people are clearly anxious and asking the employees what's going on. Unfortunately, about 20 people behind my team and I is a Karen. Karen's flight leaves in 30 minutes and I note the fact that she's behind us in line, which means she probably just showed up only half an hour before her flight leaves, which is insanity. Then for the next 30 minutes, Karen is pushing past people, some of them are on the same flight as her, without asking any sort of permission. Karen is also yelling loudly this whole time at any employee she sees about how they are incompetent, need to let her through, etc. She's also demanding that they need to open up the other security lanes so more people can go through faster. Obviously, TSA guidelines are not a thing to this Karen. So then finally, Karen literally pushes her way through the line to about 5 people away from where my team is waiting, and there's no way we are letting her through. That's when I decided to get a little more revenge for all those poor employees and all the other nice and respectful people waiting there. Being at the back of the line, my friend and I tell the few people in between the Karen and ourselves that they can skip ahead of our whole team because they are also on the flight that Karen is about to miss. They go through and finally Karen gets there, expecting for us to let her through too. Ha! We told her that she was very rude to the employees and we were not gonna let her pass. She tried to shove past us, which was hilarious. She huffed and puffed behind us and was mumbling a bunch of stuff about us the whole rest of the way through the line. So we are finally about 3 people away from where our IDs are checked. Karen has finally stopped yelling at every single possible employee that comes by because we are so close to the front. Remember when I mentioned earlier the employee who comes by to remind us to look for TSA pre-check on our boarding passes? Well, it turns out Karen was yelling over or at this guy the whole time and never got the info, and when she finally started actually listening to the people who worked there, she found out she could have skipped the entire line from the very beginning of this story. Just amazing. I swear some people laughed out loud when she went, "Oh, I have that." And yeah, Ripe Stars, that is probably one of the most annoying things ever. Dealing with entitled people in an airport or on an airplane. If you've ever had any run-ins with entitled people at airports, then please let us know in the comments. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. This is a story that I've been itching to tell for a while, but was told legally it was best to not mention anything until it was settled. Now that there is nothing stopping me, I want to tell you all about what happened when I came to my senses and divorced my ex-wife. I know right away people are going to say that a divorce takes 2 people, and since you're only hearing it from my side, it is biased. Before I get into what happened, I just want to talk about the things that led up to the fact that I divorced my wife. When we were dating and in the early life of marriage, she was a totally different person that I found her to truly be. She had put on this act of a normal and even at times shy and meek woman. I loved to take care and do things for her, and she would always seem so happy for the smallest things. She had also told me that she had never really connected with a guy before and for a long time thought she was never going to find anybody that really understood her. She told me stories about her parents being addicts and her having to leave home young and start a life for herself. It turns out that all of that was a total lie, and once we got married, the real her started to show through. I found out that her parents were in fact not addicts and instead out of her life because she had on multiple occasions stolen money from them in order to buy alcohol and drugs herself. Also, the shy girl was gone and in her place was a demanding woman that would constantly yell and get verbally aggressive when things did not go her way. Finally, it turns out that she was great at connecting with other men, so much so that even though we were married, she had cheated on me with multiple guys. I knew that if I was going to have a happy life, I had to get out of that marriage and divorce her. One thing I want to mention is that even before we got married, she had moved into my house. We were not married long enough for the issue of putting her name on the house to even come up. All the paperwork and deed was solely in my name. Anyway, at first she seemed pretty accepting that I wanted to get a divorce from her, but as I learned, she was not the one to make anything easy. She ended up at one point calling the police when I was in another room and did not know. They showed up and she started yelling that I was her ex-husband and that I was trespassing on her property. They did not want to listen to a word that I had to say regarding any of it. I don't know if this is everywhere, but the police system can be a little broken where they assume whoever called them is in the right, and if she says I'm trespassing, they will do what she says and remove me from my own house. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I really hope this did not happen in the US. I was brought into the station and had to fill out paperwork and talk to officers for hours, with still none of them listening to me that it was my house, in fact. They just assumed that the divorced woman gets to keep the house. I was told this was an eviction, and if I tried to go back to my house and she called again, I would end up in jail. I really did not want that, so I was able to stay with my friend for a little while to work all of this out. I contacted the lawyer that I was using for the divorce and explained to him that she had kicked me out of the house and I was not even allowed to go back and get any of my things. He knew the house was mine, and since we were all meeting in a few days to finalize the divorce, he urged me to wait until then so we could hash this thing out with everybody present. I went and saw my ex sitting with her lawyer and wanted so badly to yell at her. I was told not to engage though, so instead I sat down and let the lawyers do all of the talking. Her lawyer was making an outrageous list of demands of things that she gets in the divorce. I'm not saying that I wanted to take everything and just leave her out on the streets, but I truly believe that if I owned something for years before I married her, then she was not getting it. For example, she wanted my stamp collection. I know I'm a huge nerd, which was worth over 100k and none of which belonged to her. When it came to the house, my lawyer asked her directly if she was residing in the house alone because I left of my own free will. Apparently her side was saying she should get the house because I abandoned her with it. She of course backed up that statement, and in that moment my lawyer knew that he had nailed her with a lie. He pulled out the police reports from that day that showed that I was removed by the police with her claiming that it was her home and I was trespassing. She stammered and whispered to her lawyer before he said that it was common for the house to go to the wife in these situations. And by the way, Ripe Stars, that is a pretty dumb common occurrence. If someone lies about you trespassing on your own property and then gets your house, that should not really be the case if you ask me. Anyway, if not, we would have to sell it and split the profit down the middle. I was not having any of that and neither was my lawyer. He pulled out papers and quoted laws stating that she had no claim to the house under any circumstances. Her name was not on the deed, no check in her name was making payments, and she was not living with me long enough for certain laws that protected her claim to the house to take effect. Instead, my lawyer said that her tricking me out violated many laws and she essentially tried to steal my home under a fake ruse. He turned to me and told me that under the law I had every right to prosecute her if I chose to. I'll admit that it was a little bit petty, but I said yes and wanted her arrested for the attempted theft of my house and lying to authorities. Now suddenly the police all believed me when I said my house was actually my own. She had to go to a totally separate court than the divorce hearing to deal with the house. It was worse because in between the two legal meetings she refused to move out of the house even though I had every right to tell her to. It was not until a judge told her that she had to leave did she finally show her true colors. She yelled at the judge and went loose on him without any regard. This changed it, so instead of getting a warning or something light, she was sentenced to actual jail for what she did. I don't know if proud is the word I would use to describe the end result of what happened between me and my ex-wife. What I do know though is that I am enjoying my life to the fullest and making sure that I see both sides to a person before I get that involved again. Her stuff was picked up by a friend and I hope that I never see her come near my house again. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.